That feeling when your stomach cramps, you strain and strain, and nothing moves because the stool has hardened and locked itself in place at the very end of the line. That's not ordinary constipation. That's stool stuck in the rectum, and one everyday food plays a bigger role in causing it than almost anything else you eat. Today we're naming that food, showing exactly why it does this to your body, and what to eat instead so it never happens to you. Let's start with what's actually happening inside the body when stool gets stuck in the rectum, because this isn't just being backed up. Doctors call this fecal impaction, and it's a specific, more serious situation than everyday constipation. Regular constipation means you're going less often, or it's harder than usual. Impaction means the stool has become so hard and so dry that it physically cannot pass on its own anymore. It sits right at the end of the digestive tract, in the rectum, blocking the exit point completely. Why the rectum specifically? Because that's the final stretch, where the body pulls the last bit of water out of the stool before it's supposed to leave. If stool sits there too long, because you're dehydrated, because you're not moving much, because you've been ignoring the urge to go, or because certain medications slow things down, the body keeps pulling water out of it. The longer it sits, the harder and drier it gets, until it's essentially cemented in place. At that point, straining doesn't help. It can actually make things worse, causing pain, small tears, or even hemorrhoids from the pressure. This is especially common in older adults, people who don't get much fiber in their diet, people recovering from surgery or an injury that limits movement, and people taking medications like certain pain relievers or iron supplements. But here's the part that surprises most people. Diet is often the single biggest lever in whether this happens at all, and one food in particular checks almost every box that makes impaction worse. Before naming it, it helps to understand why food matters so much here in the first place. Your colon is basically a slow-moving conveyor belt. Fiber is what keeps that belt moving at a healthy pace. It adds bulk to stool, holds onto water, and helps stool stay soft enough to pass without a fight. Water does something similar. Without enough fluid, even fiber-rich stool can turn hard and difficult to move. Now flip that around. Foods that are low in fiber, high in fat, and low in water content slow the colon down. Fat in particular slows gastric emptying and colon motility, meaning food sits in the digestive tract longer than it should. When stool moves slowly, more water gets reabsorbed from it along the way, so by the time it reaches the rectum, it's already denser and harder than it needs to be. Add dehydration on top of that, and you have the perfect setup for stool that's difficult, sometimes impossible to pass without help. Some foods do this a little, others do it a lot, and there is one food eaten daily by millions of people that manages to hit almost every single one of these risk factors at the same time. Very low fiber, high fat, and a unique effect on stool that most people have never even heard of. Doctors and gastroenterologists have flagged this one specifically, again and again, in cases of fecal impaction, especially in people who already eat a low-fiber diet or don't drink enough water. That food is cheese, and more broadly, dense dairy products eaten in large amounts without enough fiber or fluid alongside them. It sounds almost too ordinary to be dangerous, which is exactly why it flies under the radar. But when you look at what cheese actually does inside the digestive tract, it becomes clear why doctors keep circling back to it in cases of severe constipation and impaction. First, cheese contains virtually no fiber. Zero. It's a food made entirely of fat and protein, with none of the bulk building material that keeps stool moving. If cheese is replacing fiber-rich foods in a meal, say a sandwich with cheese instead of vegetables, or a plate of pasta loaded with cheese instead of a side salad, you're not just adding a low-fiber food, you're actively displacing the fiber you would have otherwise eaten. Second, cheese is high in fat, and fat slows down the entire digestive process. It slows how quickly the stomach empties, and it slows how quickly the colon contracts and moves material along. This means whatever you ate is sitting inside the digestive tract longer than usual, giving the colon more time to pull water out of it. Slower movement plus more water removal equals harder, drier stool by the time it reaches the rectum. Third, and this is the part most people have never heard, the protein in dairy, called casein, digests very slowly compared to other proteins. It takes the body more time and effort to break it down, which adds to the overall slowdown already caused by the fat content. On top of that, the calcium in dairy products has a mild binding, firming effect on stool. This is part of why doctors have long noted that high dairy intake, especially in young children and older adults, is strongly associated with harder stools and higher rates of constipation. Put all three of these together: no fiber, high fat slowing transit, and a binding effect from the protein and calcium, and cheese becomes almost uniquely positioned to turn an already sluggish digestive system into a fully blocked one. It's not that eating cheese occasionally will cause impaction on its own. The danger shows up when cheese is eaten frequently, in large amounts, by someone who already isn't drinking enough water, isn't moving much, or isn't getting fiber from other places in their diet. In that setting, cheese isn't just a minor contributor, it can be the tipping point. Here's how that plays out step by step inside the body. Say someone eats a heavy cheese-based meal, pizza, a cheeseburger with extra cheese, a plate of baked pasta, and doesn't pair it with much fiber or fluid. The fat in that meal slows the stomach from emptying at its normal pace. The food moves into the intestines more slowly than usual. As it creeps through the colon, water continues to be pulled out of it, the way it normally would, except now the process is stretched out over a longer period of time because everything is moving slower. By the time this material reaches the rectum, it's already denser and firmer than it would have been with a lighter, higher fiber meal. If this happens as a one-time event, the body can usually still manage it. But if this pattern repeats meal after meal, day after day, cheese-heavy foods, low fiber, low water, the stool arriving at the rectum keeps getting harder and drier each time. Before we go further, this is also why the usual advice can feel so frustrating. Because there's a second piece most people miss. Sometimes the problem isn't just what you ate, but what your gut has lost the ability to handle. There's a short video I want you to see that breaks down a strange 8,000-year-old underwater gut superfood connected to smoother digestion, less heavy bloating, and a more balanced gut environment, even when fiber, water, and probiotics haven't been enough. Over 79,000 adults have used this natural approach, and the China connection behind it is honestly surprising. Point your phone camera at the QR code on your screen now to watch the video, or use the link pinned in the comments. Then come right back here, because this next stage is exactly what you want to prevent. Eventually, it becomes packed so tightly that normal muscle contractions and straining aren't strong enough to move it. That's the point where stool becomes truly stuck, not just delayed. This is especially dangerous for certain groups. Older adults often already have slower colon motility due to age, plus they may be eating softer, dairy-heavy diets because they're easier to chew and prepare. Children who drink a lot of milk and eat cheese but resist eating vegetables are another high-risk group doctors frequently mention. And anyone recovering from surgery, dealing with limited mobility, or taking constipating medications is at even higher risk if cheese and dairy make up a large part of their diet during that time. Once stool reaches this level of impaction, the body starts sending clear warning signals, and it's important to recognize them early rather than assuming it will simply pass on its own. The most obvious sign is the inability to have a bowel movement despite a strong, persistent urge. This is often paired with intense cramping or pain in the lower abdomen, bloating that doesn't ease up, and in some cases nausea or a loss of appetite because the digestive tract is essentially backed up from one end to the other. One symptom that catches many people off guard is something called overflow diarrhea. This happens when liquid stool from higher up in the intestines finds a way to leak around the hardened, blocked mass in the rectum. People sometimes mistake this for a sign that things are moving normally again, or even think they have a stomach bug, when in reality it's a red flag that there's a solid blockage further down that liquid is simply squeezing past. If this happens alongside an inability to pass normal formed stool, it's a strong indicator that impaction, not simple diarrhea, is the real issue. Other signs include rectal pain or pressure that feels different from typical constipation discomfort, small amounts of bright red blood on toilet paper from straining or minor tears, and in more severe cases, symptoms that extend beyond the digestive system entirely. Things like a general feeling of being unwell, low appetite, or even confusion in older adults, since impaction can affect the body more broadly than people expect. If any of these symptoms show up, especially combined with several days of no bowel movement, it's a sign this has moved beyond something that diet changes alone can fix in the moment, and medical attention is the appropriate next step, since a hardened, impacted mass sometimes needs to be manually or medically removed rather than passed naturally. While cheese stands out as the food most frequently flagged in these cases, it rarely acts alone. There's a small group of other foods that, when combined with heavy cheese or dairy intake, make the situation considerably worse. Understanding these helps explain why some people seem to run into this problem repeatedly, while others who eat cheese occasionally never have an issue at all. White bread and other refined, processed grains are a major contributor. Like cheese, they've had almost all of their natural fiber stripped away during processing. When someone's diet regularly includes cheese-heavy meals built on white bread or white pasta, think grilled cheese, cheesy white pasta bakes, or fast food burgers on soft white buns, there's essentially no fiber anywhere in that meal to counterbalance the slowing effect of the fat and dairy. Red meat, particularly in large portions, is another common pairing. It's slow to digest, contains no fiber, and when eaten frequently alongside cheese, as in dishes like cheeseburgers, cheesy meatloaf, or heavy pasta dishes with meat sauce and extra cheese, it compounds the slowdown even further. The combination of two dense, fiber-free, slow-digesting foods in the same meal, eaten regularly, is a pattern doctors often see in patients dealing with chronic constipation and impaction. Bananas, especially underripe ones, deserve a mention as well, though they're more misunderstood than truly dangerous. Unripe bananas contain a type of starch that can have a mild binding effect, and are lower in the soluble fiber that ripe bananas offer. Eaten occasionally, this isn't a major concern, but for someone already dealing with a low-fiber, dairy-heavy diet, adding unripe bananas as a regular snack can be one more small factor tipping things in the wrong direction. And finally, highly processed snack foods, chips, crackers, packaged pastries tend to combine low fiber, high fat, and very little water content, the same three ingredients that make cheese risky in the first place. On their own, these snacks are unlikely to cause impaction, but layered on top of a diet that's already heavy in cheese and dairy, low in fruits and vegetables, and light on water intake, they add up. It's rarely one single meal that causes stool to become stuck in the rectum. It's the repeated pattern, meal after meal, day after day, where fiber is consistently missing, and fat, dairy, and processed carbohydrates are consistently present. The good news is that this entire chain of events is highly preventable, and the fix doesn't require cutting cheese out completely. It requires being strategic about how it fits into the rest of your diet. The goal is simple: counterbalance the things that slow digestion down with things that speed it back up. The first and most important step is adding fiber back into any meal that includes cheese or dairy. If you're having a grilled cheese, add a side of fruit or a handful of raw vegetables. If you're eating cheesy pasta, add a big serving of vegetables into the sauce itself, or serve a side salad alongside it. Whole grains matter here too. Swapping white bread and white pasta for whole wheat versions instantly adds fiber to a meal without changing much about how it tastes or how it's prepared. Foods like beans, lentils, oats, berries, pears, and leafy greens are especially high in the type of fiber that adds bulk and softness to stool, and pairing even small amounts of these with dairy-heavy meals can make a noticeable difference over time. Water intake matters just as much as fiber, if not more. Fiber actually needs water to do its job properly. Without enough fluid, extra fiber can sometimes make constipation feel worse rather than better, because it adds bulk to stool that isn't soft enough to move easily. Aiming for consistent water intake throughout the day, rather than a large amount all at once, helps keep stool soft enough to pass without strain. This becomes especially important on days when cheese, dairy, or other low-fiber foods make up a bigger part of the diet than usual. Movement is another piece of this that often gets overlooked. Physical activity helps stimulate the natural muscle contractions of the colon that move stool along. Even a short walk after a heavy cheese-based meal can help counteract some of the slowdown that meal creates. This is part of why sedentary lifestyles, combined with a dairy-heavy diet, show up so often together in cases of chronic constipation and impaction. Movement is one of the simplest tools the body has to keep things moving, and it works directly against the slowing effect that fat and dairy create. For people who already know they're prone to constipation, whether due to age, medication, limited mobility, or a history of impaction, it's worth being especially mindful of days with heavy dairy intake. This doesn't mean eliminating cheese or treating it as an enemy food. It means being aware that on days when cheese is a bigger part of the diet, it helps to be more intentional about fiber, fluids, and movement to balance it out. For older adults in particular, since both slower natural digestion and softer, dairy-heavy diets tend to overlap. Small daily habits, a glass of water with each meal, a piece of fruit alongside a cheese-based dish, a short walk after eating, can meaningfully lower the risk over time. It's also worth paying attention to how your body responds over a period of days, not just after a single meal. If you notice that bowel movements have become less frequent, harder to pass, or accompanied by straining and discomfort over the course of several days, that's the moment to look at what's been on your plate. Often, people can trace the pattern back to a stretch of meals that were heavy on cheese, bread, and meat, and light on fruits, vegetables, and water. Making adjustments at that stage, before things progress to a full blockage, is far easier and far more comfortable than dealing with an impaction after it has already set in. At the end of the day, cheese itself isn't the enemy. It's the imbalance that turns it into a problem. A food that's fine in moderation, alongside fiber and fluids, becomes a much bigger risk when it consistently replaces the foods your digestive system actually needs to keep moving. Understanding that balance is really the difference between an occasional slow day and a stuck, painful blockage that requires medical help to resolve. The body gives warning signs along the way: slower movements, harder stool, more straining, long before it reaches the point of full impaction, and those early signs are usually the best opportunity to make a change before things get uncomfortable or serious.